The ancient whispers of the collective unconscious tell us a profound truth that many have forgotten in our modern age. Suffering is not the prerequisite for achievement. Welcome to a journey that challenges one of humanity's most persistent and damaging myths: the belief that greatness requires pain, that success demands sacrifice, and that meaningful accomplishment can only emerge from struggle. This pervasive shadow has loomed over human consciousness for millennia, creating a psychological prison that limits our potential and distorts our relationship with ambition. What if I told you that this belief is not only unnecessary but actively harmful to your deepest self? Consider for a moment the last time you abandoned a dream because the path appeared too arduous. Perhaps you've whispered to yourself, "Nothing worth having comes easily," while simultaneously shrinking from the perceived suffering that lies ahead. This paradox creates an internal conflict. We desire achievement yet fear the journey toward it. The psyche, in its profound wisdom, recognizes this contradiction and responds with resistance, anxiety, and sometimes complete paralysis. But what if this entire framework, this collective agreement that suffering is the currency with which we purchase success, is fundamentally flawed? What if the integration of the self and the pursuit of individuation could occur without the sacrificial mentality that has dominated our cultural narratives? The archetypal hero's journey, so fundamental to human storytelling, has been misinterpreted throughout the ages. We celebrate the trials and tribulations, the descent into the underworld, the confrontation with the shadow, but we often miss Jung's deeper insight, that these challenges are not imposed from without but emerge organically from within as opportunities for consciousness expansion. The suffering we experience is not a toll demanded by the universe for our ambitions. Rather, it is the natural resistance encountered as consciousness evolves beyond its current limitations. This distinction is crucial, for it transforms our relationship with achievement from one of payment and sacrifice to one of natural growth and integration, from suffering as prerequisite to challenge as catalyst. Within the architecture of the psyche lies an innate drive toward wholeness, what Jung termed the process of individuation. This process does not demand suffering. It demands attention, consciousness, and the courage to integrate the disparate aspects of our being. When we mistake the challenges of growth for necessary suffering, we create a false narrative that breeds resistance, resentment, and ultimately disconnection from our authentic path. The collective unconscious contains not only the shadows of human experience, but also the luminous patterns of fulfillment, achievement, and wholeness that do not require the sacrificial mindset we have inherited. These patterns, these archetypal roadmaps to fulfillment, have been obscured by our cultural fixation on suffering as the price of admission to a life well lived. Today, we will excavate these hidden pathways to achievement, pathways that honor the wisdom of the psyche without demanding its martyrdom. Through a Jungian lens, we will explore how the integration of the conscious and unconscious aspects of the self naturally leads to achievement without the burden of unnecessary suffering. We will discover how synchronicity, rather than struggle, can guide our journey, how the shadow, when faced with compassion rather than combat, becomes a source of creative energy, and how the transformation of energy, rather than its expenditure, becomes the currency of meaningful accomplishment. This is not merely a theoretical exploration, but a practical roadmap to reimagining your relationship with achievement, ambition, and the authentic expression of your most individuated self. The concept of suffering as a prerequisite for achievement is deeply embedded in the collective unconscious, that vast reservoir of shared human experience that shapes our perceptions and expectations. Throughout human history, narratives of struggle and sacrifice have dominated our understanding of the path to success. From religious parables of martyrdom to cultural tales of heroes overcoming impossible odds, the psyche has been conditioned to believe that value must be purchased with pain. This archetypal pattern is so ingrained that we rarely question its validity or necessity. Yet Carl Jung would invite us to examine this belief critically, to understand it not as an objective truth, but as a symbolic representation of psychological processes that have been externalized and concretized in our collective mythology. Jung understood that the psyche naturally seeks wholeness through the process of individuation, the integration of conscious and unconscious elements of the personality into a coherent, authentic self. This process involves facing aspects of ourselves that have been repressed or denied, which can indeed be challenging. However, the challenge itself is not suffering in the traditional sense of pointless pain or sacrifice. Rather, it is a necessary encounter with reality that leads to expansion of consciousness. The distinction is subtle yet profound. Suffering emerges when we resist this natural process, when we fight against the psyche's inherent movement toward wholeness. Achievement without suffering does not mean achievement without challenge. It means approaching those challenges with consciousness and integration rather than resistance and fragmentation. The archetype of the wounded healer provides an illuminating perspective on this distinction. Jung noted that healers often carry wounds themselves, but their effectiveness stems not from their suffering but from their relationship to that suffering, their ability to transform it into wisdom and compassion. The wound itself is not the source of healing power. The integration of the wound into the healer's conscious identity is what allows for transformation. Similarly, achievement does not require suffering. It requires the integration of all aspects of the self, including those that have been wounded or neglected, into a coherent whole capable of directed action. This integration naturally involves facing discomfort, but discomfort transformed through consciousness is no longer suffering. It becomes a catalyst for growth. Consider the Jungian concept of enantiodromia, the tendency of things to turn into their opposites when taken to extremes. Our cultural obsession with suffering as the path to achievement has reached such an extreme that it has begun to transform into its opposite, a paralyzing fear of action. When achievement is too tightly coupled with expected suffering, the psyche naturally hesitates, creating precisely the kind of internal resistance that leads to real suffering, the suffering of unfulfilled potential, of dreams deferred, of a life half-lived. This psychological paralysis is not evidence that suffering is necessary. It is evidence that our belief in necessary suffering has created a self-fulfilling prophecy that actually impedes authentic achievement. The collective shadow of our achievement-oriented society contains the disowned aspects of our relationship with success, our desire for ease, for joy, for flow, for achievement that emerges organically from authentic self-expression rather than forced discipline and sacrifice. Jung would suggest that by integrating this shadow, by acknowledging and honoring our desire for achievement without unnecessary suffering, we can access a more whole and balanced approach to accomplishment. This integration does not eliminate challenge or effort. Rather, it transforms our relationship with challenge and effort by removing the additional burden of expected suffering. When we separate achievement from suffering in our psychological framework, we create space for a new archetype to emerge. The archetype of the joyful creator who achieves through alignment rather than struggle. The persona, that mask we wear to meet the collective expectations of society, often incorporates the belief that we must visibly struggle to legitimize our achievements. Consider how frequently we validate accomplishments through stories of hardship. I worked 80-hour weeks. I sacrificed everything. I pushed through extraordinary pain. This narrative has become so dominant that achievements that come easily or joyfully are often viewed with suspicion or dismissed as less valuable. Jung recognized that the persona, while necessary for social functioning, becomes problematic when we identify with it too completely, when we begin to believe that the mask is the authentic self. The persona of the suffering achiever is particularly insidious because it demands constant performance of struggle, creating actual suffering where none need exist. Jung's concept of the self, the archetype of wholeness and the regulating center of the psyche, offers an alternative model for achievement. When we align our conscious goals with the deeper currents of the self, achievement flows more naturally, with less resistance and unnecessary suffering. This alignment doesn't eliminate effort or challenge, but it transforms our experience of effort and challenge from burden to meaningful engagement. The self, as the organizing principle of the psyche, naturally moves toward expression and fulfillment. When our conscious ambitions align with this deeper movement, we experience what might be called effort without suffering, intense engagement that energizes rather than depletes, challenge that expands rather than diminishes. Synchronicity, Jung's principle of meaningful coincidence, plays a crucial role in achievement without suffering. When we are aligned with the self, external events often seem to conspire in our favor. Opportunities appear at the right moment, necessary resources become available, and supportive relationships form without forced effort. This is not magical thinking, but a recognition of the profound interconnection between psyche and world that Jung observed throughout his work. The psyche that is integrated, that has reconciled its internal conflicts and aligned conscious intention with unconscious content, naturally moves through the world with less friction. Achievement still requires action, but that action meets less resistance both internally and externally, creating a path of reduced suffering. The alchemical principle of solve et coagula, dissolve and coagulate, provides a useful metaphor for achievement without suffering. The alchemists, whom Jung studied extensively, understood transformation as a process of breaking down existing structures, solve, before reforming them at a higher level of organization, coagula. Applied to achievement, this suggests that we must sometimes allow our existing approaches, beliefs, and identities to dissolve before new, more effective ones can form. This dissolution can be uncomfortable, but need not involve suffering if approached with consciousness and trust in the process. The suffering emerges when we resist the dissolution, when we cling to outdated aspects of the self that no longer serve our growth or achievement. By willingly participating in the natural cycles of dissolution and reformation, we align ourselves with the psyche's inherent wisdom, reducing unnecessary suffering while still facilitating profound transformation. The tension of opposites, another key Jungian concept, reveals that achievement and ease are not true opposites but complementary aspects of a greater whole. The integrated psyche does not choose between achievement and comfort but holds both in creative tension, allowing a third possibility to emerge that transcends the apparent contradiction. This transcendent function operates beyond the binary thinking that insists achievement must be purchased with suffering. Instead, it reveals that the highest achievements often emerge precisely when we find the flow state where challenge and capacity are perfectly matched, where we are fully engaged but not overwhelmed, where effort is intense but energizing rather than depleting. This state of flow, of engaged ease, represents achievement without suffering in its purest form, and it becomes increasingly accessible as the psyche moves toward greater integration and wholeness. The shadow aspects of our achievement drive often contain the very qualities that would allow for accomplishment without unnecessary suffering. Jung observed that the shadow, those aspects of ourselves that we have repressed or denied, often contains not only our darkness but also our unlived light, our disowned gifts and capacities. Many individuals unconsciously sabotage their own success because they have relegated their natural talents, their capacity for ease, and their ability to receive support to the shadow. They believe achievement must be difficult because they have disowned the parts of themselves that would make it easy. By integrating these shadow aspects, by reclaiming our natural gifts and allowing ourselves to receive support, to experience flow, to achieve with joy rather than struggle, we open pathways to accomplishment that do not require the suffering we have come to expect. The mother archetype in Jungian psychology represents not only nurturing but also the natural processes of growth and development that occur without forced effort. Consider how a plant grows, not through struggle or sacrifice, but through a natural unfolding that occurs when conditions are supportive. The seed does not suffer to become a tree. It simply expresses its inherent nature when provided with appropriate soil, water, sunlight, and time. This archetypal pattern of organic growth offers a powerful alternative to the narrative of achievement through suffering. When we create the right conditions, both internally through psychological integration and externally through supportive environments, achievement unfolds as a natural expression of our authentic self rather than as the result of battle against resistant forces. The anima and animus, the contrasexual aspects of the psyche that Jung identified as crucial for wholeness, play essential roles in achievement without suffering. The anima, the female aspect in men, brings receptivity, intuition, and connection to the unconscious, while the animus, the male aspect in women, brings assertiveness, logical structure, and directed action. When these aspects are integrated rather than projected or repressed, achievement becomes a dance of receptivity and action, of intuitive guidance and structured implementation. This balanced approach reduces suffering by allowing us to receive insights and support from the unconscious, rather than forcing solutions through conscious effort alone, while also providing the directive energy necessary to manifest those insights in concrete form. Jung's understanding of libido as psychic energy, rather than merely sexual energy, offers insight into achievement without suffering. He recognized that energy in the psyche, like energy in physics, is neither created nor destroyed, but rather transformed from one form to another. Suffering in achievement often results from resistance to this natural flow and transformation of energy, from trying to force energy in directions contrary to its natural movement within the psyche. When we align our conscious goals with the deeper currents of psychic energy, achievement requires less forced effort. The energy that would otherwise be consumed by internal resistance becomes available for creative expression and directed action, allowing for greater achievement with less expenditure of force and less experience of suffering. The transcendent function, Jung's term for the psyche's ability to unite opposites and create something new that transcends contradiction, provides perhaps the most powerful tool for achievement without suffering. This function emerges when we hold the tension between opposing forces within the psyche, rather than identifying with one side and repressing the other. In the context of achievement, the transcendent function allows us to honor both our ambition and our need for ease, both our desire for growth and our need for acceptance of what is. From this tension, a third way emerges, not achievement through suffering, not passive acceptance of limitation, but a creative path that honors both the drive to become more and the wholeness that already exists within. This path naturally reduces suffering while enhancing meaningful achievement by transforming contradiction into complementarity, struggle into creative engagement. The process of individuation, becoming who we truly are, stands at the heart of Jung's psychology, and it offers profound guidance for achievement without suffering. Conventional approaches to achievement often involve forcing ourselves to become something other than what we authentically are, creating internal resistance that manifests as suffering. Jung would suggest that true achievement emerges not from becoming what we are not, but from becoming more fully what we already are in potential. When our goals and ambitions align with our authentic nature, with the blueprint of the self that lies within the psyche, achievement flows with reduced friction. The challenges we encounter become opportunities for greater self-knowledge and integration, rather than obstacles to be overcome through suffering. Jung's concept of the temenos, the protected sacred space where psychological transformation occurs, has direct relevance to achievement without suffering. Creating a temenos for achievement means establishing boundaries that protect our energy, attention, and resources from dissipation. Within this container, psychic energy concentrates and transforms more efficiently, requiring less forced effort to achieve meaningful results. Many individuals suffer unnecessarily in their pursuit of goals because they fail to create this protected space, allowing their energy to scatter across too many priorities or to be drained by influences that do not serve their central purpose. The temenos is not about isolation but about conscious choice regarding what we allow to enter our psychological space during periods of focused achievement. The numinous aspect of achievement, its connection to meaning beyond mere material or social reward, represents another Jungian pathway to accomplishment without unnecessary suffering. Jung observed that engagement with the numinous, with that which fills us with awe, wonder, and a sense of connection to something greater than ourselves, energizes the psyche in ways that mere ego-driven ambition cannot. When achievement is connected to deeper meaning, when it serves values and purposes that transcend personal gain, the psyche aligns more fully with the task at hand. This alignment reduces internal conflict and resistance, transforming potentially difficult efforts into meaningful challenges that energize rather than deplete. The suffering associated with achievement often stems precisely from its disconnection from the numinous, from the reduction of accomplishment to empty status or material acquisition. The Jungian understanding of complexes, emotionally charged clusters of ideas and images centered around a particular theme, illuminates how unconscious patterns create unnecessary suffering in achievement. Complexes around achievement often form in childhood through experiences with authority figures who linked accomplishment with conditional love or approval. These complexes operate autonomously unless brought into consciousness, creating patterns of self-sabotage or driving excessive achievement behavior disconnected from authentic needs. By becoming conscious of these complexes, by recognizing, for example, how the driven achiever complex or the unworthy receiver complex influences our behavior, we can integrate these patterns rather than being controlled by them. This integration naturally reduces suffering by aligning our achievement efforts with our authentic needs rather than with unconscious compulsions. The principle of complementarity in Jungian psychology suggests that apparent opposites often complement and complete each other rather than existing in true opposition. Applied to achievement, this principle reveals that ease and effort, receptivity and action, ambition and acceptance are not opposing forces but complementary aspects of a balanced approach to accomplishment. The suffering in achievement often emerges from an imbalance, from overemphasis on effort without corresponding receptivity, from constant striving without periods of consolidation and integration. By honoring the complementary nature of these seeming opposites, by creating rhythms that include both active pursuit and receptive allowing, we naturally reduce suffering while enhancing sustainable achievement. Dreams and active imagination, two pathways to the unconscious that Jung emphasized in his work, offer direct access to achievement without suffering. The unconscious mind possesses wisdom and creative potential far beyond what the conscious mind can access through deliberate effort alone. By establishing a dialogue with the unconscious through dreams and imagination, we gain insights, solutions, and directions that would be unavailable through conscious striving. This receptive approach complements active effort, reducing suffering by allowing unconscious wisdom to guide conscious action rather than forcing solutions through limited awareness. Many of history's greatest achievements and discoveries have emerged through dreams or moments of reverie, rather than through suffering and struggle, illustrating the power of this receptive mode of accomplishment. The principle of compensation in Jungian psychology reveals that the unconscious naturally balances the conscious attitude, providing what is missing for psychological wholeness. When the conscious mind becomes fixated on achievement through suffering, the unconscious often compensates through dreams, symptoms, or synchronicities that point toward easier pathways to the same goal. By paying attention to these compensatory messages rather than dismissing them as distractions, we access more balanced approaches to achievement. This doesn't mean abandoning effort or discipline, but rather complementing these qualities with the receptivity, intuition, and natural flow that the unconscious offers as compensation for an overly rigid conscious approach. Jung's understanding of psychological types provides insight into achievement without suffering by highlighting the importance of honoring our natural cognitive preferences. He identified 8 psychological types based on the combinations of 4 functions: thinking, feeling, sensation, intuition, with 2 attitudes, extroversion and introversion. When we attempt to achieve using methods that contradict our natural type preferences, when an intuitive type forces themselves to focus exclusively on details, when an introverted type adopts an extrovert achievement strategy, we create unnecessary suffering through internal resistance. By understanding our psychological type and aligning our achievement methods with our natural cognitive strengths, we reduce this resistance, allowing accomplishment to flow more naturally from our authentic functioning. The concept of the psychological inflation, identifying 2 completely with an archetype or aspect of the psyche, explains much of the suffering associated with achievement in modern society. When we inflate around achievement, when we make it the center of our identity and self-worth, we create suffering through one-sidedness and loss of proportion. Jung observed that inflation is always followed by a compensatory deflation, a psychological correction that often manifests as failure, burnout, or loss of meaning. By maintaining psychological balance, by holding achievement as important but not all important, by maintaining connection to other values and aspects of life, we prevent this inflation and its consequent suffering. Achievement becomes part of a balanced life, rather than a desperate pursuit that demands sacrifice of everything else. The alchemical stage of nigredo, the blackening or decomposition phase of the transformative process, offers a reframing of the challenging aspects of achievement. Difficulties encountered on the path to accomplishment can be understood not as suffering to be endured, but as a necessary breaking down of outdated patterns and approaches, a composting of what no longer serves to create fertile ground for new growth. When viewed through this alchemical lens, the challenging aspects of achievement become meaningful rather than merely painful. They are recognized as transformative rather than punitive, as purposeful dissolution rather than pointless suffering. This shift in perspective doesn't eliminate difficulty but transforms our relationship with it, reducing suffering by revealing the purposeful nature of challenge within the greater process of achievement and growth. The mandala, Jung's symbol of psychological wholeness and integration, provides a powerful metaphor for achievement without suffering. In a mandala, diverse and even opposing elements are arranged in balanced relationship around a center, creating harmony through proper relationship rather than through elimination of difference or complexity. Similarly, achievement without suffering emerges not from eliminating challenges or difficulties, but from integrating them into a meaningful whole organized around central purpose and value. When challenges are given their proper place in the greater pattern of achievement, neither denied nor allowed to dominate, their capacity to cause suffering diminishes. They become elements of a balanced process rather than obstacles to be overcome through force or endured through sacrifice. Jung's recognition of the importance of the body in psychological life reveals another dimension of achievement without suffering. The body possesses its own wisdom, its own needs, rhythms, and capacities that must be honored rather than overridden if we are to achieve without unnecessary suffering. Many conventional approaches to achievement ignore or actively suppress bodily wisdom in service of abstract goals, creating suffering through disconnection from physical reality. By integrating bodily awareness into our pursuit of achievement, by honoring our need for rest, for movement, for sensory pleasure, we reduce suffering while paradoxically enhancing our capacity for sustainable accomplishment. The body becomes an ally in achievement rather than a limitation to be overcome through suffering. The Konyangsho, Jung's term for the mystical marriage of opposites within the psyche, offers insight into the integration of effort and ease in achievement. When effort and ease are experienced as opposing forces, achievement involves suffering as we push against our desire for comfort and rest. When these apparent opposites are integrated through the Konyangsho, effort takes on qualities of ease, while ease becomes a form of effort. We discover effortless effort, active receptivity, engaged relaxation, states that transcend the conventional dichotomy that makes achievement seem necessarily painful. This integration doesn't eliminate challenge, but transforms our experience of challenge from suffering to engagement, from depletion to energization. The collective unconscious contains not only the archetypal patterns of suffering, but also the archetypal patterns of flow, grace, and achievement through alignment rather than struggle. Jung recognized that certain universal patterns of experience and meaning exist across cultures and throughout history. By consciously connecting with the archetypal patterns of effortless achievement, evident in concepts like Wu Wei in Taoism, the zone in athletics, or flow states in creative work, we can draw upon collective wisdom that transcends our cultural conditioning around necessary suffering. These archetypal patterns offer alternative templates for achievement that honor challenge without fetishizing pain, that recognize effort without equating it with suffering. Jung's concept of the participation mystique, the unconscious identification with persons, objects, or environments, illuminates how our achievement contexts shape our experience of suffering. When we work in environments or relationships characterized by a participation mystique with suffering, where struggle is valorized and ease is suspect, we unconsciously absorb and enact these patterns regardless of their necessity or value. By becoming conscious of these unconscious identifications, by choosing environments and relationships that embody a different participation mystique, one that values effectiveness over struggle, results over visible effort, we naturally reduce suffering in achievement. The context becomes a supportive container for accomplishment rather than a reinforcement of unnecessary pain. The Jungian understanding of symbols as transformers of energy offers insight into how we can redirect the psychic energy that would otherwise manifest as suffering in achievement. Symbols bridge conscious and unconscious aspects of the psyche, allowing energy to flow between these domains in ways that conscious intention alone cannot facilitate. By engaging with symbols that represent achievement through alignment rather than struggle, whether through visualization, ritual, art, or symbolic action, we create channels for psychic energy to flow more naturally toward our goals. This symbolic approach doesn't eliminate the need for practical action, but complements it by addressing the deeper psychological patterns that often create internal resistance and unnecessary suffering. Jung's recognition of the importance of meaning in psychological life directly counters the notion that suffering is necessary for achievement. He observed that the psyche can endure remarkable challenges without experiencing them as suffering when those challenges are embedded in meaningful context. When our achievements serve purposes beyond ego gratification, when they connect to values, service, or contribution to something greater than ourselves, the challenges encountered are experienced as meaningful rather than merely painful. This doesn't eliminate difficulty, but transforms our relationship with difficulty from one of pointless suffering to one of purposeful engagement. The meaning doesn't justify the suffering. Rather, it transforms what would otherwise be experienced as suffering into something qualitatively different. The Jungian concept of the circumambulation, approaching a center through an indirect spiral rather than a direct line, offers an alternative to the forced, direct approach to achievement that often creates suffering. The psyche naturally unfolds through circumambulation, approaching its goals through seemingly indirect paths that honor complexity rather than forcing premature resolution. When we align our achievement efforts with this natural movement of the psyche, when we allow for exploration, integration of setbacks, reconsideration from new perspectives, we reduce suffering by honoring the actual process of psychological and practical development. Achievement becomes a dance rather than a march, a spiral rather than a straight line, reducing suffering through alignment with natural unfolding rather than forced directness. The integration of the inferior function, that aspect of our psychological type that is least developed and most unconscious, represents a crucial step in achievement without suffering. Jung observed that the inferior function often operates autonomously unless integrated into consciousness, creating patterns of self-sabotage or compensation that undermine achievement efforts. By consciously developing this function, by the thinker honoring feeling, the intuitive engaging with sensation, and so on, we create greater psychological wholeness and reduce internal conflict. This integration naturally reduces suffering in achievement by aligning diverse aspects of the psyche toward common purpose, rather than allowing unconscious functions to operate at cross-purposes to conscious intention. Jung's understanding of neurosis as suffering that has not found its meaning directly illuminates the transformation of suffering in achievement. The suffering we experience in pursuit of our goals often stems precisely from its disconnection from meaning, from the reduction of achievement to external metrics or social validation rather than authentic purpose. By reconnecting achievement to its deeper meaning, to the values it serves, the growth it facilitates, the contribution it makes, we transform what would otherwise be experienced as pointless suffering into meaningful engagement. The challenge doesn't disappear, but its quality fundamentally changes, becoming a vehicle for meaning rather than an obstacle to happiness. This transformation represents the ultimate alchemical work, not the elimination of lead, but its transformation into gold, not the avoidance of challenge, but its transmutation into meaningful engagement that no longer qualifies as suffering in any meaningful sense. As we draw our exploration to a close, we return to the fundamental insight that has guided our journey through the Jungian landscape of achievement. Suffering is not the currency with which we must purchase success. The psyche's natural movement toward wholeness, toward the expression of its authentic potential through the process of individuation, does not require the sacrificial mindset that has dominated our cultural narratives. By distinguishing between necessary challenge and unnecessary suffering, between engagement and depletion, between the hero's journey and the martyr's path, we have uncovered a more integrated approach to achievement that honors both ambition and well-being, both transformation and acceptance, both becoming and being. The individuation process reveals that our highest achievements emerge not from battling against our authentic nature, but from becoming more fully who we truly are. When our goals and methods align with the deeper currents of the self, with the organizing principle of the psyche that naturally moves toward expression and fulfillment, we discover pathways to accomplishment characterized by flow rather than force, by synchronicity rather than struggle, by meaningful engagement rather than empty sacrifice. This alignment doesn't eliminate challenge, but transforms our experience of challenge from burden to opportunity, from depletion to energization. The obstacles we encounter become not barriers to overcome through suffering, but invitations to greater consciousness, greater integration, and ultimately greater authenticity in our achievement. The collective shadow of our achievement-oriented culture contains the disowned aspects of our relationship with success, our desire for ease, for joy, for achievement that emerges organically from authentic self-expression rather than forced discipline and sacrifice. By integrating this shadow, by reclaiming these disowned qualities and incorporating them into our conscious approach to achievement, we create space for a new archetype to emerge, the joyful creator who achieves through alignment rather than struggle. This integration doesn't eliminate effort or discipline, but transforms their quality from burden to expression, from obligation to opportunity. The effort remains, but the suffering, the additional layer of resistance, resentment, and disconnection, dissolves through psychological integration and conscious choice. The Jungian understanding of symbols as transformers of energy offers a practical approach to this transformation. By engaging consciously with symbols of achievement through alignment rather than struggle, whether through visualization, ritual, art, or symbolic action, we create channels for psychic energy to flow more naturally toward our goals. Similarly, by establishing a dialogue with the unconscious through dreams and active imagination, we gain access to wisdom and creativity beyond what the conscious mind can access through deliberate effort alone. These approaches don't replace practical action, but complement it by addressing the deeper psychological patterns that often create internal resistance and unnecessary suffering. The result is achievement that emerges from the integrated self rather than from the separated ego, from wholeness rather than fragmentation. As you move forward from this exploration, carry with you the profound truth that your achievements need not be purchased with your well-being. The psyche's natural movement toward wholeness, when consciously engaged and honored, creates pathways to accomplishment that align with rather than oppose your deeper nature. By distinguishing between necessary challenge and unnecessary suffering, by integrating conscious ambition with unconscious wisdom, by honoring both effort and ease as complementary aspects of the achievement process, you create space for a more integrated approach to success. This approach doesn't promise absence of difficulty, but offers transformation of your relationship with difficulty, from pointless pain to meaningful engagement, from sacrifice to sacred participation in your own becoming. The invitation is not to abandon achievement, but to achieve from wholeness rather than division, from integration rather than fragmentation, from the authentic expression of the self rather than the compensatory striving of the wounded ego. In this transformation lies the key not only to reducing suffering, but to discovering that your greatest achievements await not beyond suffering, but beyond the belief that suffering is necessary at all. If this perspective on achievement without suffering has resonated with your own journey toward wholeness, I invite you to join our community of seekers exploring these Jungian insights in greater depth. Subscribe to this channel to continue your exploration of the psyche's wisdom. Like this video to help others discover these transformative ideas, and share your own experiences in the comments below. Together, we can challenge the collective myth that suffering is the prerequisite for achievement, and create new narratives that honor both our ambitions and our well-being. Remember that the greatest achievement is not what you accomplish in the world, but who you become in the process, and that becoming requires not suffering but consciousness, not sacrifice but integration, not force but alignment with the deeper wisdom of the self.